Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It is Thursday, and it's another episode of the MSP Initiative. But we're mobile in the RV Channel Strong Tour going across America right now. So hopefully my connection sticks in there. We bring back the one, the only, Mr. Dave Sobel. How you doing, Dave?
I am rocking and rolling. I'm watching your progress as you guys move across the country.
Yeah, it's a lot of miles in a short period of time. So you got to be ready for that mentally, you know.
You know it. You gotta keep the energy level up, right?
Exactly. So I have our friends from Paxade, Cronus, Stockstarter, Connect Booster. Got Matt Lee from Iconic IT decided to come along with us for a part of the leg of the trip. And we're, got a couple other people. I said it Cronus already. And then we have a couple other people meeting us already for compliance groups on the trip. And we have some friends that are kind of stopping in different parts of the tour as we're going through America. So far, so good. Everybody seems to be, on their P's and Q's. We're following all, the directions. But it's just nice to be back out on the road, literally speaking. You know what I mean?
I know some of you guys are addicted. You guys got to be out there.
Well, listen, you got to create your situation, right?
Totally true. Totally true.
So things obviously are progressing. We seem to check in with you every 2 to 4 weeks or so. So the question I want to go through, and I've been following some of your progress here on your podcast, right? Business Exec.
Okay.
So I wanted to get an idea from you on, a couple of topics that you brought up I thought were pretty interesting.
Cool.
One was, does it matter to the end customer what brands you have in your stack? And I actually put a little bit of thought into this, as you actually put the topic out there. And I think from a big vendor perspective, there probably is some onus there, right? Like Microsoft's pretty big, or Apple's pretty big. The MSP-centric brands may be a little bit less household names, so they just don't necessarily care. So I'm curious, like, as you were doing your research for this, and hopefully I'm sure you've talked to different people, different MSPs. Obviously, you've been in the industry for a long time. What is the demarcation point between large enough that the end customer cares or small enough that they just need a checkbox?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and for those that didn't catch it, I did an editorial. It's out as a YouTube or a bonus episode on my podcast, and I was asked by one of my Patreon supporters, how much do customers care about the brands that you do business with? And so you asked the right questions, but I want to go one step further, because the real person that matters on this is the end customer. All that really matters is who is the understanding that the end customer has of these brands. You mentioned two, let's take them on right away, like Microsoft and Apple. I think there is some level of differentiation on a select few brands. We might be able to call them the big tech ones, because I would lump like Google, Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Microsoft, the big five. They probably have some level of actual care from an end customer perspective. And the reason is very particular, is those companies have a relationship with end customers that is personal as well as business. You've got a relationship with Apple, right? You own an iPhone. You probably have an emotional connection to your phone. But if you're an Android user, you own a Google device. You have experience with them on a consumer level, and you interact with that technology all the time. The big thing about those five is that they are in your life every single day, and you cannot escape them. Now, does an end customer care about those brands? I'd say a little bit, like it's non-zero, right? It's non-zero. But if you, the technology provider, has a recommendation, you're probably able to overcome it if you needed to. But the question is, do they care? I don't think a end customer is going to buy from you because you say, oh, I do business with Microsoft. I think they kind of expect you to do that. I think they expect you to understand those big five companies that I was talking about, and it's essentially irrelevant. Now let's go a little bit deeper, right? Let's go into the kind of the next level of big companies. HP, Cisco, like these big brand name, Lenovo, like anybody in these, and they're generally going to be in the hardware space, right? Because they're very large. I think this is the instant where it doesn't matter. If you go to most end customers and you sell them your brand of whatever, right? We do business with Lenovo, we do business with HP, they are going to take your recommendation. I might give a little
Okay.
asterisk for Apple and the Mac. There are going to be people that are like, hardcore Mac people, and they're going to probably, as business owners, look at it from the perspective of, I don't want to be retrained, or I don't want my people to be retrained. They're going to weigh that, but you could overcome it. I would probably advise you not to try. But if you're go to most business owners and you say, hey, I know you buy Lenovo laptops, we're going to switch you out for for Dell ones, they're going to just say yes. They don't care. And you definitely get the further back, if you recommend one firewall brand or networking switch, the end customer just does not care.
There's a demarcation point, right? Because I would assume everything we talked about so far has been about SMB, and I know that is quantified differently depending on who you talk to. But once you get into slightly larger organizations, they may have a different opinion on these things, right?
So, sure, I think the answer is yes, but it's only going to really come from a contract relationship perspective. I really think, I don't think that these are not buyers that are generally going to be buying for emotional reasons. If you're dealing with, say, a mid-market company and you're dealing with the IT shop, they may say to you, hey, we have a 3-year contract for support with Cisco. We're very happy with that. You can overcome that. If you came in and said, look, I've got a 15-year experience with, Meraki or no, sorry, think of somebody, I'm trying to come Ubiquity, right? And I want to put in a different wireless access point. They're probably going to still go with your recommendation because they've brought you in for your expertise. And that's the theme of where I'm going with this is expertise will always beat out that brand loyalty at almost any level. That's what happens when you bring in system integrators, solution provider, VAR, whatever level they're at, it wins.
So then, Dave, does it matter about being the platinum partner for XYZ vendor or the gold for solutions provider for XY? Does that matter then if the end customer just doesn't really? They're really just buying an outcome, right? Does that marketing make a difference?
Not really. Not really. Now, it's going to make a difference to the MSP, the solution provider, the reseller, the system integrator in terms of their ability to execute, their ability to get a good margin, their ability to get monies to put into market development. Like I'm not dismissing all of that value. That value, however, is to the provider, not to the end customer. And that's where my statement is do not get that hung up on these vendor name brands out to the end customer, because ultimately doesn't really matter.
So the logos on the bottom of the website of, hey, we work with all these companies, you're telling me that's not going to really make a difference on the buyer at this point?
Not really. It's the and not so much that I wouldn't put much energy there because of it's such a negligible difference. There are things you can do that'll make such a better difference in terms of the way you position it. Like if you took that energy, time, and money and made sure your own messaging was more targeted or more specific or slightly better polished or a little bit more efforts or did better measurement, all of those moves are better. And I like to think about this always. I ask the question of this or that. In a vacuum, sure, it's fine, right? If you say like, does the brand matter? Maybe. But does it matter more than all of the other things I can do? When when I only have 25 hours in a day, right? Like I only have so much time, so much resources, so much money. I want to make sure I'm putting that time and energy in exactly the right spot.
Fair enough. So let me actually go slightly to the left of this conversation then. The concept of channel conflict has been around for a long time, where your
Right.
end vendor and your end customer, right? You're sandwiched in between that, and now all of a sudden somebody goes around from the direct team. They're communicating directly with the end customer from your upstream vendor, and then you're now in a bad position in certain instances. So really, if you follow what you've just said, the positioning of, hey, I'm not concentrating on brands, I'm concentrating on my delivery, my brand, my story, helps negate the reality of channel conflict to a degree.
I believe that 100%, like 100%. And I can see this, by the way, in where the monies are made. So I literally was just quoting on this on yesterday's podcast. Google had some new metrics talking about how well their partners are doing in their channel program, right? So for every dollar spent in the Google on Google Cloud technology in 2020, partners are generating $5.32 in their own offerings. Okay.
Oh,
Now that's Google. And last I checked, they're not giving you a whole bunch of options. They're not like a massive partner opportunity kind of company. But for every dollar spent with Google, $5.32 in those different. Now, here's where it also gets really interesting. The partners in the Google ecosystem, on average, are growing at a rate of 35% year over year. 1 in 5 of those are growing at 75% year over year. And again,
wow.
right. And again, I'm not sitting here going, Google's the most channel-friendly guys out there.
Not at all. Not at all.
So I look at this and I go, look, I get the idea of worrying about, I don't want my vendor partners coming in and causing problems, right? I don't want them calling to the same list. But remember, to a certain degree, there is a level of diminishing returns for them. Particularly the smaller you are as a provider, the much less those vendors are really interested because they have to man a whole sales team. They just don't want to do that. I get it in the mid-market. I get it for certain sizes. Look, manage your vendor relationships well. Make sure you're doing a good job with your deal reg stuff. Call them out when they do it, but I would say don't spend so much time worrying about that. The real money is on the services anyway, and that's where you're like, even if the vendor beats you in there and sells that product direct, you're still going to make a ton of money on the services, so just go for that.
Sure, fair enough. So where does the role of distribution then fit into all of this, right? Because so far we talked about vendor, MSP or solutions provider, and end customer, right?
Right.
But then there is this cog now, right, in between MSP, solutions provider, and vendor, right? There's this distribution bubble that exists. Like, how do you factor that into this entire conversation from your perspective?
Yeah, so there's a couple of areas where distribution adds really good value, right? And I particularly right now, I always am leading off with how good a job distribution is doing in terms of helping with financing, the financial support, the credit lines. Like you've got to start there, because particularly with all of the stuff we're seeing in terms of like the market right now, like it's kind of a crazy place, right? So I would sort of say, like, we've definitely got to make sure that you're protecting yourself cash wise and you're taking advantage of all these programs. There's some recent data. SolarWinds put out their COVID-19 impact response research, right? 59% of surveyed MSPs applied for government financial relief programs. 74% of them got it, right? And I'm the first one to applaud. Go for it. That is what these programs are for. There is no shame in taking that when the economy is doing what it's doing. There is also every reason to take distribution up on their offers to finance things. Like, that is what they are awesome at doing. The second thing they're really great at doing is they are good at helping you manage the complex vendor relationships. Like, you need to work on deal registration, you need to work with them to resolve these conflicts. Distribution can do that for you. These are the areas that they are really good at. And I'm the first one to sort of admit, like, I've been down on distribution before, and I admit it, and I'm eating crow publicly saying I have been so impressed by the way they've stepped up that I'm coming back and saying, like, look, they are proving their value when it's needed most. Leverage them for these programs.
Fair enough. I appreciate that feedback, and frankly, it sounds like it's a mistake to not investigate your options there, because otherwise you'll lose out on financing and financial vehicles that you otherwise wouldn't have.
Right, and so, why you, the small solution provider, are going to take any financial risk, particularly right now when cash is king? Conserve it as much as you can. If the distributor is going to help you and add that value and help you navigate all of the deal reg and conflict, man, take it. Take that help.
For sure. So let's pivot a little bit. You mentioned the financial programs. Obviously, here in the United States, PPE forgiveness is starting to kick in, and all the other programs that came along with that. And we'll never know if there's going to be another round or not. That's just the political game that we're all watching on TV.
Right.
But switching to job numbers, right? What are you hearing now from it sounds like unemployment, is going down, right? The requests that are going in for unemployment insurance is going down. Obviously, the additional supplemental federal unemployment, on top of the state benefits, has gone away until they decide to maybe bring it back. We'll see. Where do you see MSPs now starting to restaff from people that otherwise were furloughed or let go, or are we still in a holding pattern from your perspective?
We're still figuring it out, and I want to make sure that, well, yes, you're not wrong that unemployment has gotten a little better. It's still in record territory. Like, we're talking 10%. So I don't want to, I don't want to give people this impression that I'm like, oh, it's getting so much better so fast. This whole V-shaped recovery thing, not happening. There's some here's again, everybody knows I'm the data nerd. That's why I'm constantly pulling them out for my show. Gartner just had some new data come out around worldwide banking and securities IT spending. Now, I like this marketplace because the capital market space is not struggling, right? The problem in the economy is not lack of money. It's not lack of credit. It's not like the financial meltdown that we see in 2008, 2009. The current situation is because the government shut down sections of the economy, So the banking industry is not a problem. Well, Gartner now says that market space on IT spend is going to drop 4.7% this year. Okay, so
that's a pretty big drop.
That's a substantial drop, right? So that's important to look at, because I look at banking and I'm saying that's not an industry that's having a problem, yet they are also trimming up. So and this is what we're starting to see, right? If they've just started, banking starts trimming it up, that means the IT spend is going to go down. You're going to see that happen over the next few months. Like, this is a longer term, it takes a lot longer for the ripple effects to come through. Now, again, I am come at this from the perspective of, I desperately hope to be wrong, right? I want to be wrong here. I want everyone to plan this way, thinking, well, there's warning, but it proves out to be not as bad. That's the best solution for everybody. But what I'm worried about is that it takes a little bit of time for these things to flow through the system, right? You just mentioned PPP money just run out. That means a lot of people were holding on to employees as long as they could, or they weren't necessarily impacted. Now, with those programs running out, we're going to start, the economy is essentially now out there on its own. Let's see what happens. I'm expecting spending to be a little bit lower. I'd heard, Forrester has some data out now. They're projecting kind of a 17% drop in revenues for solution providers when you look at it for the year. That's the current highest probability case. So I'm looking at this saying it's still a little early. I'm not ready to declare any kind of victory. I'm just saying, like, if I'm a captain of the ship, I'm looking out saying those waters look choppy, and I think they're choppy for a while. I would love for this, so far it hasn't been as bad as we've thought, and the numbers have been better, but they're not getting better fast. Like, they're not getting fast. This is even if we're looking at a recovery, it's not a V-shaped one. It's probably a U-shaped one, meaning going a long time out before it gets better. So the long-winded version of saying, like, I'm feeling like the market is just at this point. We're going to start seeing a lot of new data points come out towards the end of August and into September, particularly, like, we'll see what the politicians come up with, right? But we'll know either way, and we'll start having some data about what it means to be without that level of protection. We're seeing big companies do layoffs, though. I'm expecting that, when I look out there.
Yeah. You hear about especially the airlines who furloughed like a half of their staff, right, with their flights disappearing, and at some point those furloughs have to convert to layoffs, right? It's not right. At some point.
Exactly, and on top of that, I mean, I keep looking, going, like, there are sections of the economy that are just really damaged. You can't tell me this doesn't have a ripple effect. So, and you're seeing it, right? Again, when I can see projections for the banking industry to be down, banking is not an industry that, they were able to pivot to work from home. Those people are still needed. Cash is still flowing, but we know they're also impacted.
So, Dave, this may be a very interesting question, but I feel it's worth mentioning in the same light. Does the presidential election have any effect on the IT services industry?
It's a good question. So I definitely can say, like, we're seeing, and I'm gonna be careful to just analyze this because we're not going to have a politics discussion here. But Silicon Valley has been reacting positively to the announcement of Kamala Harris as VP. There's been a lot of buzz on that. How Silicon Valley is feeling very comfortable with that. I definitely think that we're going to see the market make some. I definitely think, when I talk about the stock market, I think there's going to be some moves that happen leading up to the election because of the uncertainty of the date itself. I think there's probably going to be some companies that try an IPO. I think technology companies may be in that realm. Think about it from a supply and demand perspective. There's a lot of money floating out there that really wants to get in on the market, right? There's a lot of people that are doing really well at the high end. They want to put their money somewhere, and a ton of IPOs are not coming out this year. So if you're in the hospitality industry, you're in the travel industry, you're in, like, there's all these sections where, like, if you were going to pop as an IPO, you are not doing it right now. So we're gonna see that. Will it affect services providers? Sure. There's going to be areas of the market that are going to probably get a little bit hot or a little bit trend up as they make moves coming into that. I think the other bit that we may see, I think regulation is always kind of the last dark horse in there. We may see some moves happen from a regulation perspective right beforehand, and they may make moves anticipating a potential change on the other side. We'll see.
Interesting. So, speaking about IPOs, whether it makes a difference or not, I think the answer is no, if I guess properly from your podcast. But you have Datto and SolarWinds who have both kind of made news in that area, right? Datto's preparing, for a 2021 transaction of some sort, and then SolarWinds MSP and SolarWinds may be actually, like, separating and splitting into separate entities. What does that mean for everyone watching?
Okay, so let me trying to be put my journalist hat on for a second. Datto has not announced anything. Yeah, so like they as a company have not announced anything. There are no dates. They have simply we have understanding that they have filed confidentially that they are intended to IPO. So there's no dates. Okay, SolarWinds on their recent investor call has announced to the market that they have gotten approval to consider a spinoff of their MSP group. That's where we're at. Neither is known. The leadership at SolarWinds has indicated that if they were to do anything, it is a big if, that it would happen in 2021. Now, in the interest of full disclosure, I am a stockholder in SolarWinds, right? So that's important to call out so that people understand that I have some money there. Let's address each one individually because I think they are unrelated. Okay, from the Datto perspective, of course they're going to IPO. Shocking, right? Like everybody knew this. This was completely the way this was on track for. I said it on the podcast. I completely predict that they're going to make a pile of money, right? Like they will go out and it will make a pile of money. Here's why. The market, as I said, is desperate for a place to put money. Technology is a great industry, doing rather well. And when you have a restricted supply, man, and you have something coming out that looks good, demand is going to pop. I think that has no statement of any kind as to the viability of managed services, SMB as a market. Like, I don't think it matters at all in terms of those discussions. It is no judgment at all. That's positive or negative, right? It's not a good thing. It's not a bad thing. They're just going to pop and the investors are going to make some money. It's actually probably a pretty good time to file your IPO if the market is restricted on supply. And we know they've been going that way for a while. As for SolarWinds, like it's interesting for them. We know that they are a publicly traded company. They are going to be making moves that are about increasing stockholder value. If they are finding and operationally that they can get better efficiencies separate, or they're not getting the benefit and they can move more aggressively separate, that's why they're going to do it. I'm going to call out Channel E2E had some really great coverage of this and talked about the interview. So if you haven't read those, I would encourage people to do that. In that interview, you can find exactly where the thinking is. Their GM, John Pagliuca, came out and said, as a separate entity, he can move more easily on small acquisitions in the $3 to $7 million range. So I would say, turn to everybody, vendor in the channel and go, hey, vendors, if this happens, somebody's in the market and will be doing a bunch of buying, right? But I would sit here and say that's their strategy. This is to free up the ability to go buy additional companies. If you believe that there is value to you as a provider in their ability to buy more companies, this is good for you. If you believe that that is all they're doing and they aren't spending those dollars on building things, you may be more negative on that.
Fair enough, which actually brings up a question by Brent on the call. So basically his question is, hey, is there a disruptor somewhere out there that can throw a grenade in the middle of all this? And his example is, hey, Panasonic Avionics rolled out a Wi-Fi solution, and it looks like GoGo, but predominantly the Wi-Fi provider for airplanes, at least domestically here in the U.S., is going out of business, right? Smaller player. I don't know if Panasonic is really smaller, but he's saying, Is there something similar in our space where there's an up and comer that's really ready to just disrupt the big guys upstairs?
So when you've got a couple of players that are all kind of neck and neck and they're all kind of offering the same thing, you certainly have the conditions for the space to be disrupted. What that looks like, I don't know yet. Like, but I have ideas, right? If we could talk about like the way that could go. Somebody could come in truly with a new way of delivering it, right? Like offer some of those same pieces at pennies on the dollar, right? So you could do it from the perspective of like it come in with that kind of 80% for 20% of the price. Somebody could completely disrupt it. I'm looking at the space going, I actually just saw a very early alpha of an open source RMM. What an interesting idea, right? You look and say, now that's, early days, right? And that would require everyone talks about the number about open source, and I'm a big believer in open source, but unless you get a number of developers all working on it and really driving to scale, and oftentimes that includes corporate investment doing it, I'm not going to sit here and say everybody, like, I think open source is going to disrupt the space. That said, there's another way this could get disrupted. And this could get disrupted by solution providers themselves in the way that they look at the space, right? So I put out a video talking about if I was founding an MSP today. And what was interesting to me was the idea of, I took it from the perspective of, I'm going to build a business application focused MSP and start there and work my way down. And I worked through my plan of that. And I put Microsoft and Azure AD and Intune right at the core of my offering there. That's a very different style of MSP. I could envision building an MSP built around Google, right? I could actually see one where I'm focused on G Suite, on business applications on top of it, going all in on Chromebooks. Like, you can see a really interesting idea, right? So maybe the MSP space decides to get disruptive by the way they move on their business. There's a couple of these factors out there. I covered it on the podcast. I always encourage people to catch up on these things because this is a couple of weeks old. Microsoft has a job listing out for somebody around a cloud PC role. What they're trying to do is develop a next generation of their Windows virtual desktop offering where Microsoft owns all the management services. It's kind of interesting, right? Like, I can see a space for that. Lenovo just made a bunch of announcements about their fully managed, managed services for the piece. I could see building a managed services provider, managed services in quotes, where I'm much more focused on the idea of business applications, and I'm leveraging those technologies for the core stuff. I can see disruption that way. So it's interesting, like, is the space ripe for disruption? Yeah, there's some conditions here that tell me maybe it is. Particularly if you think about it from a maturity level, we wouldn't have all of the PE in this space if it wasn't somewhat mature.
No, that's totally true. Let me pick up a piece that you actually just touched on, because very timely, right? Microsoft Inspire was a few weeks ago. You hear Microsoft with Intune seems to be really starting to concentrate on the MSP vertical where they maybe haven't put the investment in it past years. You heard along with that, Intune starting to take a center position. You hear a collaboration between Microsoft and SolarWinds from an RMM type collaboration. Where do you see that going?
So Microsoft really interests me, and I consider them very innovative and different right now. They are Satya Nadella is a great leader to that organization. You can tell he is driving them to think about their marketplaces in new ways. Let's talk at a real high level strategy for them. Everything is about their Azure business. Everything is about their Azure business. And let me give you a really kind of out there example to paint the picture. Microsoft is moving really aggressively, of course, this holiday season with their Xbox Series X and their X Cloud offering. What's really interesting about the way Microsoft is attacking the market versus Sony is that Microsoft is coming in here where the core product really appears to be their subscription service Game Pass, much more than the devices. Sony is really worried about selling PlayStations. Microsoft wants to sell you X Cloud and Game Pass, and why. They can give away X Cloud and instead sell Azure licensing to the software providers to put their games running on Azure. So that's why xCloud really matters in that subscription service. Now, we all put our managed services, monthly recurring revenue lens on that going, Oh, I get it. Like if we can get end users to consume the computing power, I'm using the generic terms, right? The computing power of the gaming, and I sell the capacity to the providers, that's a great business for them. So let's think about this in our market. Cloud services, Azure stuff, ON Microsoft 365, all powered by the back end. It's really great for them to get as many workloads onto that as possible. So their interest in investing in Intune, super interesting. Like this is a long play. Intune's been around for a long time, and they've slowly been working on it and keep getting it. It's finally hit that point. I think it's very telling, the partnership between SolarWinds and Microsoft. What did they do? SolarWinds has said, we're not going to build that because Microsoft already has it locked up. We're going to integrate with it. And pulling from their own webinar, Microsoft said those are all just open APIs. The power of their partnership is that they like each other. Right? They work well together. They do a ton of business together. So it's good for them to work together. Of course it is. And it makes logical sense, right? SolarWinds binds to the Intune offering. They extend from one another. But let's not miss out on the fact that SolarWinds has said, we can't build that better. We can't do that better. We're going to let them have that space. So when I look at this from a disruption perspective, where is the line? And Microsoft's really good at this, right? They've got their own AV products, but they allow space for the rest of the market to have additional ones. They've got, other security products. They've got a backup product. They have space for their partners to do other things. I completely expect Microsoft to run exactly that playbook. The question is, we just don't know quite where the edge is. But my thinking would say, I'm going to lean in on my Microsoft relationship because it makes a lot of sense.
No, all good points. It's definitely here, right? I think Intune, for a better part of a decade, has been out there, but it's really, to my friend Ken Patterson from Backbase, he says the last year has been super exciting, right? I mean, what they've done with it. Where the last 9 years prior to that's been not so great.
They can be slow in a market, but they get it right. If they keep playing at it, they will get it right. They will come for you. You can see it in all of their things, right? They're coming for Zoom. Teams all of a sudden, like tons of investment there. Why? They're coming for Zoom. Why? Cloud workloads. It's all really good. It's all tied into the strategy, and you can completely see it. So yeah, I think they're another kind of interesting player to think about the way that this might get a little bit disrupted.
Fair enough. So since we're on the topic of Microsoft, and I think yesterday the news dropped that they're now taking pre-orders for their new dual-screen Duo Android-powered smartphone after every failed Windows phone that ever came before us. This thing's going at like $1,500. Do you think it's going to make it?
Maybe, and I don't think it has to. So the interesting thing that I'm going to look to is I'm going to look to the Surface space, right? So Microsoft has their Surface line, the conventional laptops and Surface devices in that space, right? Microsoft doesn't have to have a massive market share in those devices. They're simply setting the floor, saying, it needs to look like this. If you're worse than this, you're not good enough. And they can drive that feature functionality upward and have some input into it. We all know they've lost on the operating system. They know they've lost in the operating system. They're not competing that way. But what they can do is they can say, in mobile phones, we think there's an opportunity to get from, in some additional functionality. We can add some additional value here, and we can have some influence over the market. So I think that's the reason why I'm like intrigued by it. I don't think they need to do incredibly well. By the way, it's not priced from a mass market perspective. That's priced in a way where they're showing what the market can do, and they're driving new ideas. I like that. I mean, we haven't seen a form factor change in mobile devices in a while. I'm kind of excited to see them try.
No, I'm on a Surface now. I'm a Surface guy. Everyone in our company gets one variant of the Surface. They just seem to work well. But yeah, I'm intrigued by it. It's funny. I'm a Microsoft everything guy, except when it comes to my cell phone, right?
Right.
Apple. It just works, and it works more than it doesn't. I feel like Android. Yeah, the Android fans out there love. Yeah, they have their fanatics, but there's way more tweaking and tinkering you have to do to keep those phones running. I'm curious to see how tightly integrated Microsoft built all of their stacks for that device line on Android. It's something completely different than what they've done before, obviously.
Yeah, and what's also interesting there, by the way, is so because I'm also an iPhone user, right? So I'll hold up my mine as well. Let's note that I'm sure we both are using Microsoft platform stuff on those devices, fully loaded with all the Office suite, with Teams, with Skype. So Microsoft has done a really nice job of making sure their stuff is everywhere. Like they are making sure that they are the productivity platform, and they've pivoted smartly in terms of moving away from just thinking of Windows. So I give them a ton of credit.
No, fair enough. So let's talk about security for a second, because even over the last day or two, there's been large security breaches again that are hitting the headlines, right? What was the one that just hit? Sam's Club? Oh, Sam's Institute? Okay. Just had a 100,000 plus account breach? Okay, so when does it stop, Dave? Where, the security thing just seems like it's just waiting for the next guy to get hit. The insurance companies are clearly going to pivot and start charging more. MSPs seem to not wake up to this until they themselves get hit or one of their customers. The software that they're using has some maybe been in the middle of that. It just seems like an ever-evolving situation. So I'm just trying to understand when everybody figures out that, it's now time to do something different. Where does this go, Dave? How does this get better?
So you're teasing, you've without even knowing, because we hadn't talked before that, you've teased up. I've got an interview coming out on the weekend on my podcast. It'll be out on Monday on my YouTube channel with Joseph Brunsman, who is a cybersecurity expert in the insurance space. So he's an insurance broker, focuses on this space. He and I talk in the interview about why rates are going up, what insurers are looking for, where those trends are happening from the insurance angle. So it's a really interesting conversation about what's going on in that marketplace. I'm going to keep saying this till everyone is tired of hearing it, but I don't think enough people have heard it yet. We really have to be thinking differently about the way we talk about security. Armed gangs of criminals are breaking into businesses, and they are holding business owners hostage with attack weapons. By the way, I would tell everybody, catch the Business of Tech tonight, where I talk about the new franchise model that ransomware creators have started doing, where they've built an affiliate network to deploy ransomware. It's an incredible franchise model that they've all built so that they're printing money over on the adversary side. So catch the episode today. It drops today at 5. But in answer to your question, what changes it? Look, if what I just described with those criminals was happening on the streets, there would be calls to arms. The government, like state governments would be told, city governments would be getting involved with their police departments, with their investigators, pulling in the FBI. This is why we're going to be regulated as an industry. This is why regulation is coming for us. The window is shortening. The window is shortening for solution providers to do something about it, to start demanding that we do something, that we actually pull together. And this is going to have to fall on solution providers. Again, that when I had this discussion with Joseph, we talk about why regulators are making the moves they're doing, how they're thinking. I think this is going to change, and our window to be part of the solution is closing. It will, because state AGs are not, attorney generals are not going to let this happen. We've clearly seen the moves already in Louisiana. I'm aware of several others. This is not the end of it. I'm not ready to report on it because I'm not, we're not at that point yet. But don't think anybody who's sitting out there saying, "Oh, the Louisiana thing is a one-off." It's not going to. You're not paying attention. It's changed. This is a whole market space, and this is, for me, this is what I'm spending a lot of my time working on and researching for my podcasts is around these kinds of issues, because I think this is the big change.
But Dave, I mean, what about the companies who, like Garmin, got hit? They paid the multi-million-dollar payout to bring their business back online, and their response is it's a tax deduction. Plus doing business.
Yeah, well, it's at some point, right? We're going to move toward more significant regulation on us as the industry on the provider perspective. We are going to get privacy laws in this country. They are coming more and more. And I mean, and you can see it because it's probably going to happen to the marketplace. So the EU just recently announced that they are no longer going to recognize the US EU Privacy Shield law, right? That's not good enough anymore. It doesn't cover EU citizens. There's some 5,800 companies of all sizes that are now that were using that as their protection and their shield. Now they're not able to do that anymore. So the EU is going to start start dictating US law, because last I checked, we all want to do business there, right? Or even if you, the local provider, doesn't, your customers probably do. There are some of your customers that do business across international lines. The rest of the world, i.e. Europe in particular, is not going to let this all just go. So these bits are coming. So I hear you. I think where I see this going is citizens and are not going to tolerate this level, and enough businesses are going to start seeing the impact. We're seeing it increase on insurance. I mean, again, we're going to use Garmin, and I'm just speculating, but I bet their insurance is going to be a whole lot more expensive going forward, right? Exactly, a lot more. These ransomware incidences, these security breaches, they are not cheap. Right? This is not a small, I mean, we're measuring it in the millions. This is not sustainable. Something's going to change.
But pivoting to the other side, Dave, now you have the bad guys, the state-sponsored, software companies basically building in all the back doors anyway, right? TikTok is the one, WeChat, right? You heard the ban that was signed. Hey, if something's not done within 45 days, where is the protection from the existing marketplace to prevent that from happening? Because it's happening from an app that should be safe because it's already in the store, right?
Right. Now, look, we have to acknowledge, if we're going to bring up TikTok, and we're going to bring that up, that is very much a set of political moves, and that is very wrapped up in politics, because it's a perception versus reality. We all know there's a bunch of security experts that have looked at TikTok and said it's not any different than Facebook or Google in terms of their extraction. I could make a pretty solid argument that the market was going to take care of that on its own, because TikTok wanted to IPO. The only way they were moving towards IPOing in the U.S. market. If you're going to go under SEC and regulation and become a publicly traded company, you're not going to be playing dirty games on the back end, and it's going to become exposed. So I think the market might have taken care of that, and I said it on the show, and I'm going to kind of keep observing. I think this is a distraction to use TikTok as an example. It's too tied up in U.S.-Chinese relations and the trade war going on for political reasons that you kind of have to separate that out from a smart conversation about regulation and privacy law. They are connected. I'm not saying that they aren't related. I just have to say, as an example, it leans too much to the trade problem versus the privacy stuff. Now, that said, we just had a whole round of massive hearings with Facebook, Apple, Google, and Amazon talking about their anti-competitive moves I tend to fall on the side of the fact that I think, moves need to be taken here. I will point to the fact that antitrust law is the one area where the US government has like a perfect batting average. They are great at that. And what they do there, it's one thing where, even no matter where you go on government regulation and government intervention, they have a perfect track record. When they come in and they take antitrust moves against companies, they oxygenate in a market, a lot of competition comes. Now, the market may reform, but I'll say, the reason why, AT&T and the big bells were broken up to become the baby bells, regulators let them get back together. But it spawned an incredible time of innovation. Even Microsoft, right, who was not broken up, but had antitrust moves made against them, that created many of the companies that we're talking about. Google wouldn't have happened if not for the Microsoft breakup. It created a bunch of innovation. So I look at this and say, this is, again, everyone likes to shake their fist, or a lot of people like to shake their fist going, oh, government bad, government bad. Have a more nuanced thought to this. There is a point where this makes sense, where if a company is using its power to squash their competition, I don't know, like a company like Instagram, where they have emails saying, I'm going to take out the competition. Maybe this is something that we should look at in terms of the marketplace and create a better environment. So I do look and say, I'm not sitting here being like I'm the super pessimistic guy. What I want to say is I think there's opportunity in this. I want some better guidelines on this. I want there to be audited elements for solution providers, because I think it's really hard right now. Figuring out the right things you need to do and do all the mapping, and you don't really know, and if you have a test for it, you're kind of on your own. And look, a lot of vendors have done a really nice job of pulling this all together. They're really trying, but wouldn't it be nice to know what actually works and what actually is the correct guidelines? I think there's opportunity here.
Fair enough. Last thing that comes to the top of my mind as we traverse the spectrum everywhere from the IT universe is, at what point does the solution provider get to dictate to their vendors things like privacy concerns, security concerns, who has control, who doesn't? For example, if you're too small, you're just dealt with the standard terms and conditions, and this is how it is. The larger you are, right, now all of a sudden you're stepping to the vendor saying, hey, we need to renegotiate these. We need to redline this agreement. My customers need additional protections that I can't give them the way that your documents, laid out. One of the, and again, I'm not trying to be targeted here, but there's some rumors out there. And again, I'm not the one putting them out there. I'm just reiterating that the Hillary Clinton emails have been found and decrypted. That these emails generated, again, I'm not trying to get super political, but, you know the story. This is not new, right? Hillary's people had an MSP. That MSP was a data partner. That data information made it into the government's hands. I don't think there was enough protection around that information.
Look, right now, it's a patchwork of laws, right? We've got laws all in different states. We've got no real consistency to it. California is making an effort. My big piece, and I'll highlight this because it's been a lot of discussion. I did a session at ChannelCon talking about MSP regulation. This is on solution providers to start banding together. Amy Babinchak has put together a Facebook group on discussing regulation and what's happening from a legislation perspective. I would encourage everyone to find that and get involved in the conversation. This is where our trade organizations can come in, be it CompTIA, be it MSP Alliance, it could be ASCII, it could be all of them, it could be some new one. This is where, and again, solution providers need to take the lead. I totally believe there's an opportunity for vendors to support that, but solution providers, you cannot wait for the vendor to put some program together, or you've got to take control of this, start having conversations, because it is an opportunity. The opportunity is to set the guidelines, to set the direction. Let me point to, and go look at my video on MSP regulation and who will lead us, but I'll reinforce look at what the lawyers did. It's super smart. They came up with their own organizations, the state bars. They wrote their own rules. They are lawyers, so they happen to be really good ones that favor them, but they wrote their own rules, and government wants to nod off on that. It's what happened with lawyers, it's what happens with doctors, it's what happens with accountants. If we put forth guidelines, they will make lots more sense than anything government comes up with on its own. Government wants to endorse an idea like this because they know there's a problem and they don't know how to solve it. This is our opportunity. And do not think, you can just kick back and say, well, I'm good enough, so, it'll just work out because I'm already delivering services. Because think about that. If you let non-qualified people write the regulations, you may be good enough and not fit the regulations because the regulations are wrong. So now you've made a bunch of work for yourself and you have to go fight regulations that don't make sense. Don't let it happen to you.
So Dave, how do people find you? I know you just mentioned this insurance, cyber insurance expert coming up. I know you obviously reference a lot of these podcasts and videos that you've been putting out. Some of them really recent, some of them a little bit further back, but it's all coming together. Where do people find all of that content?
So I'm easy to find. Everything is at mspradio.com. What I would say is there's two big things to do. The first is hit the blue subscribe button, find the podcast on your favorite podcatcher. It's free, everybody, and it's only 5 minutes a day. So you can find it however you want to listen to that news, even on Amazon devices in your flash briefing. mspradio.com, there's a big blue subscribe button. I put out all of the content, including these long-form editorials, come out on the podcast. On Mondays, I put out a video version of it on my YouTube channel, which you can also now find. It's at youtube.com/c/MSP Radio, or there's a link right on mspradio.com. I really encourage people to hit the red subscribe button and then hit the little bell to get the notification. That way you know when these things come out. It's designed to be easy to consume. 5 minutes of podcast content a day. You're getting 3 to 4 stories with information and a perspective of why you care.
Really appreciate you coming on, Dave. Sounds like you're kind of a free spirit out in the world, just trying to educate the world. So I appreciate you for, keeping topical, I guess, and bringing some of the more important, news, to the top of the board, the top of the bubble, if you would. And I really think Q3 going into November, because we all know what happens then, there's got to be stuff that all intertwines to that point, in my opinion. I think that's going to be the focal point of the rest of 2020.
I think you're right. Look, I'm out here I'm trying to spark conversation. I don't sit over here saying I have every answer. It's why I dig around in as much data as I do. If somebody thinks that I'm wrong, I'm the first one to go, that's awesome. I'm glad you think something because you formed an opinion and now you can do something with that information. It's okay to be wrong. I'm fine with that. In fact, I really welcome the debate. So find me, reach out, let me know what you're thinking about these ideas. And I look forward to coming on anytime you need me, George.
Awesome. And Brent, I am currently on the Channel Strong RV bus on my way to Phoenix, Arizona for our next Channel Strong in-person live outdoor event. For everyone that's following us or not, you can find us at mspinitiative.com/Channel Strong Tour. We're on LinkedIn and Facebook and Twitter. If you just search for #Channel Strong, you'll see our entire progress, and we're trying to do some recent updates as we're traveling along the road. So this is 15 cities in 3 weeks. This is city number 4. We've got a long way to go, so definitely keep watching us, and we'll still be doing our Tuesday and Thursday MSP Initiative shows like we did today. Thankfully, our hotspot setup worked out today. But Tuesdays and Thursdays, 1 o'clock Eastern, and then keep eyeballs on our tour online. Thanks for joining us today, Dave, and thanks everybody for watching today. And we'll see you on the fly.